Yeah, baby. You gotta mix it, fix it. When you go to eat your cereal, you tricks it. Too many people trying to mix it, licks it. Well, I saw you down on the corner store. I seen you there many days before. I wondered, my, what the little fly boy like you doing hanging out with the goons in town. Oh, saw you by the liquor store. I asked you what you been down there for. You said I ain't got nothing to do with my time, so I'm committing petty crimes. And I walk down the streets through the city, flocks and geeks. I see people walking around, beating beats, beat diddy that, diddy do, and you say, what's your name? Where you come from anyway? I go to school to study education. My friend, it's such a thrill, it's such a high elation. You see, when I get to the top of the investigation.
Oh my goodness, welcome. I didn't even see you there. I was just eating some breakfast with my pals, Pastor Eric Deepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. This is Faith Over Breakfast.
Oh, hey, Brian.
Hey.
Hey,
I didn't even see you there.
How's that sandwich?
It's so good. We are in Tucson, Arizona. Oh, that's so rude of me.
The crinkle of the napkin. This is authentic radio. Wow, live.
I don't even think this is radio, guys.
Details. We are at Exo Coffee. We're so thankful that they let us come up into their loft area and record this little podcast of ours. I am the host, Brian Betts, and I'm with, like I said, Pastor Eric Deepen and Pastor Andy Littleton.
That's right.
And we have conversations about faith and breakfast and what did I mess up this week? And that happens all the time.
Oh yeah. I mean, all of us, not just you, Brian.
Yeah, mine's more comedic, but the purpose is more comedic on my end. But
yeah, and this is a big week this week because it's the first week that we have a scheduled guest on our program, and we have a guest who is scheduled to be here, and it was really exciting, and it still really is, except they're not here.
Right, because they'll be here next week.
They'll be here next week. So
because Eric dropped the ball. But speaking of things where people drop the ball and screw up, well, that'd be me this week.
Oh man, poor us, poor Eric.
Another recording of the three of us talking. It's going to be bad.
Except here's the thing. So there's a nice comfy orange chair because Exo has great repurposed chairs that they pick up at the auctions. And Exo it's just a stylish place.
Yeah.
It's eclectic in a good way. It's got all kinds of style, all kinds of fun. We're looking at some paper flowers up here on the wall. We're sitting at a steel case table. Steel case people. How great is that? Brian, what do you think?
It's nearly impossible to climb up and down, but I really love those staircases.
Yeah. Okay.
And specifically, it's for the offices where people can't climb down unless they work here, but we have the freedom to use them to come up here to record them. But we are hopefully going to have a conversation with the owner.
Yeah, I think Amy Smith, the owner of Exo Coffee, one of the owners, might be venturing up here to say hello, and possibly our buddy Brian, Mike, from our church might be popping in to say hello. So
the creative director.
Creative director.
Is that too?
No, that's it.
Okay, that's perfect.
His title.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Let's just be honest. The first controversy, we're calling people directors and creative. Let's just be honest.
Isn't your whole church supposed to be creative? Isn't that the whole premise of the
but
village?
we don't have any creative directors.
Aren't you the creative director?
No. I'm just an old school pastor. Let's just be honest.
Just
none of these
straight up clerical collars and suits.
No, our clerical collars are bandanas. If you wear the
And
bandana,
shells.
and shells,
I'm going to show up to your church in a bandana.
We did have bandana day.
Really?
Because it was church was on April 19th, which is my birthday.
Oh.
So we called it Bandana Day, and everybody wore a bandana, and it was hilarious. All the little kids with bandanas.
Oh my gosh! I'm gonna wear.
And then we had a
bandana.
whole stack of them that we gave out to visitors, so that was fun.
Yeah, I don't know What would happen on my birthday if everybody were to dress themed? I don't know.
Beard Day.
Beard Day?
Women with beards.
Sorry, women can't come.
You can just hand out like fake beards to tape onto your face.
Maybe plaid button downs.
Plaid button downs.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, plaid button downs.
Wear your Vans. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'll post a picture of our cars on Instagram.
Oh yeah. Everybody bring pictures of all the cars you ever owned.
Yeah, that'd be pretty good.
Yeah, okay. It's possible.
So
It's
we,
doable.
by the way, have 46 listeners this week.
What?
What?
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And our very first podcast has
Stop
a whole
it.
57 listens.
Man.
To it.
Oh, man.
And Japan
And that was the worst one.
is moving it. Like they are listening to us, and I may have gotten a clue as to a few of our listeners
In Japan?
in Japan. So I was talking to one of the people at our church, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm corresponding with a friend of mine, and this guy actually led him to Christ, and they were talking about life."
Okay.
And he's like, "Oh yeah, he's in Japan." And I said, "Where in Japan?" And he's like, "Tokyo." And I'm like, "Oh wow," because that's where all the listeners
where they
are.
are. So they're real.
So they're possibly.
You're really listening.
There are possibly somebody in Japan we know who really enjoys us.
Whoa.
So hi
Hello?
to
Would you email us? faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com?
Somebody email us.
Yeah.
Tell us that you're listening.
In Japan? 'Cause
We're
this
really
is-
lonely. Even if you're not in Japan, we just want some kind of stroking to tell us that you're listening.
Just say hi. We need it.
Yeah.
Any sort of confirmation that you're out there.
Yeah. The good thing is there's three of us here, so somebody's always listening.
That's true.
So there's that.
Right,
And we're in
I
a
mean-
restaurant, so some people are listening whether they want to or not. So
That's
there's
right.
that. But it's good to know. Hey, folks in Japan, thanks for watching.
Yeah.
And thanks for listening.
Yeah, the whole watching comment is because a couple weeks ago I said that we had viewers, but I was referring to our Facebook page, our website, or Facebook page. We have a website that's I've been working on that should be done next week.
Hey, you heard it here first. faithoverbreakfast.com?
Yes, correct. Now, and I should say the format will be
.com.
done.
Yeah,
But
.com.
the hope is that myself...
Brian's making a point.
Oh, gosh.
You heard the train whistle.
So whenever-
Listen up, people. Listen very closely. That's our soundbite. I pushed the button on the computer for that one. Brian's about to make a point.
Yes, whenever... There's another shtick that we have, that whenever we are discussing something and a train comes by, that's when I make my point. That's when I make my most profound point.
So what's your point?
That was it.
Oh.
I don't think it better repeat.
I don't. Well, I think that because we're mostly pastors, we also have to over-explain everything that we do. That's our entire life, explaining everything
Twice.
to people twice.
Twice in the introduction, twice in the conclusion, twice in the middle.
Yes.
And I did stand-up, and I'm always repeating jokes because I think they're the greatest jokes, and they're all terrible.
This is new information on the podcast, folks. That's what the train was about. Brian Betts,
Is
a stand-up comedian.
I did
can you
stand
give
up.
us one of your more popular jokes?
I mean, everything that I say is comedy gold. I don't need to say any. No, I know.
Was that the joke?
Yeah, that was
Oh,
the joke.
okay.
Yeah, not funny at all. I did it for 3 years, and then I joined the military, so you can tell how well that went.
Oh, man.
But
Well,
you'll see some humor splashed into the website. I'll just say little quirks throughout. Especially if you see my old website, which I'm not going to give. I'm not going to plug my own stuff.
BrianBetts.com?
No. No, it's not. Thank goodness. It's super close. It's super close, but no, that's not it.
.me?
.us.
.me. No. But if you really want to, just look at the About Me's. There's my old podcast called See Through. There's an About Me for that, like about the podcast. And then there's About Me, this long little excerpt that's like talks about me, but it doesn't. Like it says that I'm from Kansas and I was raised by wolves, actually, which we
That was
brought to
on-
light last week.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was raised by wolves. Sorry, mom
makes
and dad.
total sense.
But yeah. But
Which is why sometimes when we're eating breakfast, we look over and you've just got a piece of meat that you're just ripping to shreds with your teeth born.
I know.
Yeah.
I keep like about to take a bite too,
Yeah.
and then you ask me a question. I'm like, oh, okay.
And I
thought I was the host, but thanks.
Yeah, I put the sound shield in front of the microphone.
That's right.
Just to downplay the ravenous sounds.
Yes, thank you for doing that. I really appreciate
Oh,
it.
you're
It makes
welcome.
me sound civil.
Yeah, we have a lot of gear here. It's intense, the amount of gear we have.
Yeah.
A microphone and a computer.
We're very professional.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we were discussing, or one of the ideas that I had, since we were going to have Mike on the show, the creative director at Mission, and a mutual friend of ours, was going to be creativity in the church and its place in it, and why it's really necessary. But since Mike is not going to be here, he's going to be here late, and that's my fault. Actually, it's not my fault. We had planned to meet at 9 just to have some personal discussion, not to actually be in the podcast because we had a different one, but it was pushed back.
There's faults all around.
Yes,
I who am always late, actually told you all I was going to be late, and then I was earlier than I said I was going to be.
I noticed
really
that. You
cool.
were the first one here.
And I think we're going to have to reschedule this to be at 8:30 now that school has started and children are.
So all of our radio
bigger
listeners,
priority.
tune in at 8:30, not 7:30.
Yeah, the ones who are watching
Set
us.
your timers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so he's going to be joining the conversation later, and the reason why we're going to be pushing that conversation back is because there are definitely some valuable voices that I'd love to hear from Pastor Eric Seepin's Church of the Village as well. So it's not just run by Village from Mission people. Sorry. So hopefully we
I'm
can
not
continue
creative
that.
anyways.
Well, we can talk about creativity a little bit, and then we'll have some places for Mike to kind of chime in on.
Yeah, definitely. But I wasn't sure. You had mentioned some things that you wanted to talk about today.
And I have a question.
And yes,
Go for it.
I want to know. Okay, this is something I've been thinking about. Do you have any good friends of yours that are pastors? Mm-hmm. This is where we find out what our relationship's all about right now. No. Do you have any, like, where it's like, this is my best friend? Or where do you find, like, a best friend as a pastor? Is it within your church or outside?
Well, I think at some level that's a completely unfair question to me because my church is actually a very different church, and so
Well, that's kind of why I'm interested in it, though.
yeah. So no, I don't have any best friends outside of my church who are pastors.
Yeah.
Because I don't really believe in best friends because I think
Okay.
that's
Okay. Close friends.
close friends.
Okay.
Yes, like I do. So yes, most of my close friends who are in ministry with me, and this has become a life thing. They
Yeah.
live across the street from me. Michael, who was going to be here this week, who's a philosopher. Our lives are committed.
Yeah.
You know, another friend of mine named Russ, who is a professor at the U of A. If I were to pick up and move to Seattle, he would pick up to move to Seattle. Like, we've committed our lives together. And more, in some ways, he's committed his life to the mission that I'm doing. So, yeah, I have those kinds of friends in my community. So it's, so I don't have friends outside. In fact, I would say, Andy, that you are probably the closest thing I have to a close friend. That's to use close as much as possible.
CFF.
Yes, you're my CFF. Outside. And it's interesting because one of the things I want to talk about is I sat with somebody at our church who just came to visit who was talking about how integrated the pastors are here in Tucson and how well they're connected to each other. And she wasn't a pastor. And she was attributing this all to Fort Tucson, which I'm not involved in at all. And
I've gone to a couple things.
And I actually feel relatively disconnected from the community.
Right.
And I feel like the community is relatively fractured unless you're conservative. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't
This
disagree with
conversation
her.
began just before we actually started recording on how Eric at one point was considered too conservative for a group of people. I don't want to go into that. I just want to make that point.
Yeah, no,
because that's surprising.
Yeah, it was. And it's not that I'm hugely liberal. Unless you go listen to the last podcast on war, then you might...
Man. Yeah.
That was good. I enjoyed it. I listened to it again. It was fun.
It was good. Yeah. Which means that probably, in general, the things we should talk about around this table on the podcast might be the ones we don't want to talk about.
Yeah, I would agree.
Which I don't even like saying that, because I know what you're going to make me talk about.
What is that?
I don't know.
Oh.
Oh, we're gonna get into them. We're gonna get into gender.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Gender's fun.
It's
We're
just
three men
everybody.
right here talking about gender.
Right, perfect. What a concoction. That's a perfect.
And white males.
Three white
cisgender.
males are gonna. This is not fraught with issues.
You know, the interesting is to talk about gender and have my daughter and some of her friends come talk who attend City, and City's got a lot of.
This is a school.
Yeah,
This
City
is
High School, and it is a very welcoming community. And so, if you're struggling with your gender, it's the high school you go to,
Right.
and so. It'd be interesting as to hear them talk from a Christian perspective on how they walk in that world and their ideas and thoughts on gender.
Yeah.
It'd be fascinating because I actually am sometimes very awkward feeling listening to my daughter talk about her theology and ideas of gender. So
Yeah. No, I'll go there with you. I will. You went there with war. But it's just, man, it's like this is just such a hot button thing, but it's probably good to talk about hot button things. Now, the reason, though, I wanted to bring up Friends was because I was thinking that, I don't know, we've got our listeners in Japan.
yeah,
I don't know who, I suppose some folks from our churches are listening, and then, some people from our extended communities. I've caught, people have said, hey, I listened to your show from California or Virginia or wherever they are, that friends of ours.
right.
And that's great, and that's cool, and that's the way it starts. But I'm assuming that either now or at some point some fellow pastors will listen in.
Yeah,
And I think our churches are different, and they're different from my church, Mission Church, Brian and I go, your church, the Village, are different from each other, but they really stand out as like different from just most of the churches in our city. And then Tucson's a really unique city where I think a lot of the churches that survive here stand out. I mean, I went to I was part of a larger conservative denomination church, and in the denomination, they thought that church was really different, even though to me it didn't feel that way at all. But because here we are in the Southwest in Tucson, and churches that run just like they do in the South or up in Michigan or whatever, they just don't work here.
Right.
I would venture to say they just they really struggle. The people that connect are people who don't connect to Tucson but happen to be here.
Right. We are transplants who've lived a long time in other
places, and they're looking for that experience. But anyway, so I would assume people would listen in, and I think a huge issue is just pastor having friends. Like I've just heard this. I've heard it a lot. So I'm wondering, what would we suggest, or what's our experience, that we could share with these other guys out here, people in pastoral ministry, leadership, men and women, I don't know, like they're people who are leading things who don't have, it's hard to have friendships. So how do you, in your church, how have you cultivated that? How have you made it to where your life's work is done with friends?
Yeah. Well, I think there are two things. I have been around a lot of pastors, and my experience is that pastors are so stuck, not because they've chosen this, but because it's the profession, on success, and not in them trying to succeed, but being told that what they're doing is not successful.
Yeah.
And that what we get told very often is that if you have 30 people, you're trying to get those 30 people to grow to 40 people, and you need to baptize some people.
Yeah.
And we all have these matrix for healthy churches, and we hold up superstar pastors. And so we're not encouraged to be with each other. We're encouraged as pastors to be in competition with each other. So here comes the noise.
Creative directors bring the noise.
They do.
But so you're saying pastors?
Right. So there's this set of competition. And so, like, I want my people to stay with me. And so we have these little tiny things that we're protecting because we're told that we're not successful unless there's these set of things. So it's difficult to be friends with each other in that sense. That's the first thing. Because
the people are, would you say, like, they're projects? And so if people are projects, it's hard to be friends?
It is. And also it's just constantly counting. How many people were there? What, how many people came to your small group? How many people came to your church service? How many people did you baptize? My fascinating thing, I was like, how many people did this mega church baptize? Okay, they baptized 300 people, and they have 10,000 people.
Yeah, I've never even seen that many people in my life.
If your little church of 80 baptized one person a year, you multiply that up, and you're going to beat the mega church.
You're right, sure.
And if you're just competing. But to say we baptized one person this year, that sounds kind of lame compared to 300. And so there's that, and we're all in our culture, we're into big. So it's hard to be friends. It's hard to just walk alongside each other and encourage each other and hope that, God is doing good things in Mission Church, and I want to know what it is, and I want to celebrate it. And if people in my church fit better in your church, or they're wrestling than we, or in a place of exchange in the sense of, I want God to be glorified in their life. It's not about the people in the sense of numbers. It's about the people in the sense of who they are and where they are with Jesus.
Yeah.
Then I can be your friend. I'm not in competition with you. I'm cheering for you, and we can kind of struggle together.
Yeah.
So anyway, that would be one of the reasons. The other thing is, I think pastors it's a vocation. My experience is you go to seminary and you get a job and you're looking for a plan. Like you need a retirement plan and a health plan and
a salary.
And a salary. And
can I just say it's just so weird. It's just weird.
To get paid?
No, not to get paid, but to think take that thought. Take that thought right there and try inserting it into an epistle of Paul, just for fun. Add a chapter where where it just says that you have to look for the right health plan and you have to look for the right salary and here's what you do. Like Paul to Timothy, it's weird. Yeah, it just doesn't seem to make sense to me. Well, in true breakfast fashion, Eric has walked away from the discussion. He had to take a phone call. But we have Mike Almaroth here, and
how's it going?
Hey, good man.
Great to see you. I'm glad you're here.
Mike's creative director, as we mentioned, at our church, at Mission Church, and he's coming. He came to hang out with Brian. We delayed the podcast, so here he is. Guess what? You're on the air, man. It's
the unwitting guest.
The unaware guest of Faith Over Breakfast.
Yeah.
But hey, same question right at you. So back when we started our church, Mission Church, we were a merger of two churches, and one of the cool things about Epicenter, the church you were part of, is that you and Nick were really good friends. So doing ministry with each other as friends, you guys weren't. It wasn't as much of a coworker. I mean, you were coworkers, but how important was that to the church and to the journey, and what was beautiful and hard about that?
Yeah, well, so we never even met until it was until basically we were both kind of united by Epicenter.
Yeah,
but yeah, we also, at the same time as growing in work relationship, we're growing in friend relationship, and I think if that's at all possible, pastors need to do that kind of thing, because you're leading a group of people, and you're trying to tell them how to have relationships.
Right.
And you're showing a relationship every week in front of them, whether you're trying to show something or not. And people see the way people in leadership and pastors and worship leaders, how they interact. And even if it's just little subtle things here and there, it makes a difference. Plus, in ministry, there's a lot of hard and sensitive things you've got to be able to approach with each other.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel like you have the depth of relationship to go there easily, that just sets the trap for all kinds of issues that can be cut off at the head. But if you don't, they're the reason, pastors end up going different directions.
Right.
Like we've seen with churches here
so
recently.
many times.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, because I don't know if I've shared on this podcast, but I've shared at our church before that for me, like, do you hear that sound effect?
That's me interrupting to share my very profound points.
Brian has a point. That's what that sound effect. Brian, what's your point? I'm sorry. I thought I was going to make a point. But
well, I just did, and you missed it because the train was in the way.
Oh man.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what happens when the train comes by. I feel like God is stirring in me something to say, and then the train comes by as soon as I say it. Then we continue right back in the conversation. So what were you saying?
Oh, okay.
About that.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no,
I felt like it's important.
That's understandable. I mean, the sound effect button was hit. What do you do? So, I think it's been so important. So some of the hardest stuff that like my wife and I have faced, or that I deal with personally, like I have shared it with people in the church, leaders in the church who could very well like take me out. Like they're the people that have like enough influence in the church that they could be like, you shouldn't be the pastor here, like they could do that. And that I just imagine that, like, because I've felt in those moments like a certain amount of fear and uncertainty, but I also knew I was really loved by these people and that they were going to be for me and with me. And so I can't imagine being in the scenario of not having that, of like thinking that I had to go to like a board of directors or an elder board and they weren't my friends, and where like they would just look at me more as a liability or a staff member that they would keep or fire depending on what was expedient.
An issue.
Yeah, just like you're going to get in the way of ministry because you stink. Versus going to people who I know like love me and like want to see me healed and see me walk with Jesus. So like they view me as a pastor as investing in their spiritual walk, but they view themselves as investing in mine. Like it goes both ways. I just can't imagine. And so I guess like we kind of, before you got here, Mike, we were saying, a few other people in ministry listen to this at the moment and maybe more would down the road. And we just kind of wanted to work out this idea, like Eric's his church is his friend group. Like that's his close-knit community. I would say that's very much true for me. I do have one of my best friends that doesn't go to the church, and there is something really nice about that, because there's never a sense like I need to talk about church stuff with him. We just sit down and just talk about whatever, and that's nice. And I would maybe suggest having that sometimes, at least from my perspective. But I just similarly like, man, if your people at your church aren't your friends, and if your leaders aren't your friends, like pay attention to that. I mean, or cultivate those friendships, or talk to them and say, hey, look, like maybe I took this as a profession and not because I love you guys. What do we do? And what do you do? As leaders, because you hired a guy you don't even like. I mean, have that conversation, because it should be like, this should be the depth of friendship within your church should be ever increasing, I would say. Yeah.
So the interesting thing about, you said bringing just these really tough issues, these struggles to your co-leaders, to the people who kind of have the power to really do something about it. I think just in the church in general, one of the things people struggle with the most is, hey, I see my friend really struggling with this, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know how I can bring it up to them. I don't know if I'm supposed to say anything. And so leading by example in that way is huge, because you can show it.
Yeah.
You can show, hey, when when we are in these situations, this is what happens. Yeah, sometimes there are consequences. Sometimes, some that entering into conflict, entering into tension, isn't always easy, and most of the time it's not. But it's always for the better of the person who is being approached. It's always for the betterment of the people around that person who are being affected by their actions.
Yeah.
And it always leads back to redemption, and that's what we're about. We're about the gospel, and God's about redemption in his story, which is our story as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a piece that, there are the scriptures like Paul's saying, follow me as I follow Christ, and Jesus saying, take up your cross every day and follow after me. And I think what often happens with people in ministry is you get this feeling, and sometimes from yourself, and sometimes it's just a cultural assumption, and sometimes from the people in your church, and sometimes your elders tell you, okay? Like, that can all happen. But you get this assumption that what that means is, like, live right. Like, get it right. Do the right thing. Be a good example, And that, I don't want to minimize that that's part of it, but it seems to me that, like, all of those ideas, like following Christ, taking up your cross, I mean, that's like essentially like laying down things that matter to you, allowing yourself to be seen as wrong, needing forgiveness and grace. And if, like, I think most pastors are pretty aware that the people in their church need mercy and grace, right? Like, that's what they need. So what do they need to learn from you? They need to learn how to receive mercy and grace, not how to live a perfect life, because they aren't living perfect lives. Yeah. And you aren't either, so you actually don't know how to do it. And so when you're acting like you are, you're not teaching them anything. You're not showing them how to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
Follow me as I follow Christ is like, look at me, repent. Look at me, confess my sin, and come with me. I don't know, that seems important to me. And you've had some good leaders, Brian, over the years. Like, have you ever experienced, like, receiving leadership like that, and the difference between that versus leadership that tries to be fine?
So, receiving opportunities to be a leader?
Or, like, having a leader that has led from their weakness and repentance.
My most recent discipler was a guy, Chaplain Myers, and he's in Korea now, but he was someone who definitely did that. And I came to him the first time I got to Tucson. The first thing I looked for was a new mentor, a new discipler, and he was the chaplain, and he has counseling experience, and he also led Sundays at the chapel. And I went to him all the time, and he talked to him about my parents' divorce and all sorts of stuff like that. And he was very transparent about stuff he went through in his dating relationship with his wife, and then everything revolving around that, and his mistakes as being an airman, because chaplains are officers, but he was actually enlisted in maintenance as well. And I was constantly failing on the maintenance side of things because I was new to the Air Force. I was new to being an aircraft mechanic. I was a writer by trade, and being an aircraft mechanic was so out of my wheelhouse and under maintenance standing. So in terms of practical things, not relating to scripture, he was there to help me along the side and walk me through that, and then also, and more importantly, to talk about the areas where I was failing and the areas where he failed was incredible encouragement to me. And I spent time in Alabama for a few years, and I actually had some, even though I had a very difficult and frustrating time in Alabama, I had some opportunity to see some good pastors there, and also a lot of pastors that were just missing the mark and not being transparent, and that's such a difficult job to be like, well, this pastor is terrible. I don't think I could do that, just other than hope that hope and pray that they get to a place where they can start being vulnerable and being transparent about where they're messing up. And I feel like when you get to that point, we talked about vulnerability. It was a second podcast, and it increases your effectiveness as a leader, but just as a person, you benefit from it so much.
Can I say, I think that's probably one of the most important things that a pastor can do, especially when you consider the millennial generation and Generation Z coming after them. That's something that is like almost I think as a Christian, it's something that should be a must. In general, because like the first tenet of the gospel really is like, hey, everyone has sinned, everyone does sin, everyone is in need of the good news, right? So especially for generations that have grown up always being advertised to, always being coerced into things, they can spot a facade a mile away. You know, it's very it's something that'll turn them off right away. And by no means do I think people need to be catered to in order to follow the gospel, but in some ways your job as a leader is to speak the language that your people can understand, and that's just something that your personality that needs to be developed if it's not there. You know. And so but honestly, that's a place that I see so many ministries just lose young people, is even just personifying that in your service, keeping everything upbeat, saying the right words at the right time, being positive and encouraging. It's just
nice little dig there.
There's a lot.
You just see the facade a mile away, and it turns you off instantly because you're like, wow, they're hiding something.
Right.
They're trying to sell me something, and they don't actually believe it because they're afraid. They're hiding. What do they have to offer me?
So if there's anybody, if I could do a little summary of what you just said. So there are a lot of people wondering, how do we reach the younger generations, through faith, right? And it seems like a lot of the methods out there that are promoted are make things that are flashy and cool, get up to their standards, do things that are done as well as what they see on television. And what we're saying right now is false. They're being advertised to all day long. You need to do something that's be honest, be different, actually tell the truth about yourself and your flaws and why you need Jesus. And that is what people are longing for, is that honest, real, something that stands out from everything that you can consume in your smartphone.
The less caveats, the better. The less you try to say, well, you know what, I'm just a sinner just like all you guys. And I need just as much grace, but God is good. No. Hey, Pastor, you need to tell your church. Hey, so I regularly get really mad with my family. Like you were quoting John Piper this last week. I regularly question whether I should even be up here on stage because I know my own sin. I regularly am aware that this is an extremely high calling, and that I'm regularly disqualifying myself if just in my thought life. And just no buts. That's the truth. God is good. God loves me.
That's why what I have to offer is the God that makes me whole, not myself. Right?
Yeah, and I definitely think that though we're not all experts on any of this, these are two churches, mine's 16 years old, and still the average age is under 30, and your guys is even younger than that.
Right.
And part of the reason I think that the things that we share in common is that there's a strong authenticity built into the structures about who we are and what the reality of sin is, and that we're all kind of under that. And the other issue is, I think people are like, we're all mentally ill, and and we need to be able to put that out there, that there's some crazy going on in our head.
Leaders especially.
Yes, leaders especially. We need to be, it's not just the people sitting out there or people we're doing Bible studies with. No, I am a little crazy that there's obsessive thinking, that I struggle with these things on a regular basis, and I'm trying to figure out how to access the grace of God just like everybody else is. I don't have the answers. I'm in this journey with everyone.
Can I just throw out a thing that I've heard from several pastors that I could just never hear again? Just okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I've heard this, and it's a little trite, but it's talking about the people of the church and just saying, well, sheep will be sheep, or something like.
Gosh.
I mean, I've heard this.
Yeah,
I have heard this lately, and this idea that like these people are just so hard to lead, right? Like they're stubborn and they're messy. Okay, like can we just all say like here on this and encourage the rest of you out there, Pastor, you're a sheep.
You
like,
are the sheep.
You're a sheep. Like there's a chief shepherd, okay? Because you're a sheep. And you're not doing better than they are. And if you ask your wife, ask your friends.
Let the church ask your wife.
Yeah.
That's more important.
Oh man, because good luck leading people when you're standing up on a soapbox, looking down at them, going, "Oh, look at all your problems," right? Man. Anyway, say, hey, rant over.
I wonder how much of that though is connected to insecurity.
Oh yeah.
Because
because
people who lead from a position like that, their value has come from their ability to do things at a high level.
Right.
But there's also this innate knowledge that I need to keep trying so hard because I know I can't keep that up.
Yeah.
But like, what a great opportunity to show, like, hey, in your deepest insecurity, you can face it and be okay, and actually it's better.
Yeah.
There's more freedom.
And guess what? All those insecure people in your church are going to go, oh, hold on, my pastor can relate for the first time, and that'd be a beautiful thing.
And that brings to light just this whole thing, which I think is one of my least favorite things about what happens culturally in churches, and one of the things I think holds us back from truly being able to live out the gospel together, and that's the hierarchy of holiness. Not that people in leadership aren't called to a higher standard, but that there's this idea that the ones who are leading have somehow been approved by their righteousness, and that they've been, like, because they are able to be more holy, they are able to be leaders. Right. When actually it's usually the opposit. I mean, that if God's choice of leaders throughout the Bible is any indication, it's not that they were the people that were approved, you guys have all heard that quote probably. God doesn't God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. But I'd say, like, that's not even true. He doesn't qualify you. He calls you and he's like, hey, you're still not qualified, but I'm qualified.
Yeah. You're gonna walk with me. Like, yeah, I know. It's pick a biblical hero. Moses. Yeah. Okay, like, does God say, like, okay, I'm gonna fix your speech impediment so you can lead? Nope. Doesn't do it. He goes, you're going to lead with your speech impediment, actually.
You're
the
still
whole time.
not qualified.
Yeah. And
even starting out all the way to the end, he still struggled with anger.
Oh, yeah.
To the very, very end.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And then at the very end, like, I don't know, I read a really interesting take on it, but, Moses doesn't get to go to the promised land, right? Yeah. So he doesn't get to finish the journey, but he dies with God on the top of a mountain. And the idea is, like, wait a second, like, which is more beautiful? To, like, win and, like, get your people there and be the hero, or to be with God as you pass from this life into eternity. And, like, we tend to read that and just be like, oh man, God, like, took away the prize. And the kind of the read on that I heard that I thought was really helpful is like, no, actually, like, that wasn't the real prize. Like, the prize is being with God. And so in all of his flaws and failures and the awareness of that, he dies in the presence of the Lord. That's kind of a cool thing, And the people didn't see him as the absolute hero, which was the best thing for them, actually, because then they hoped in the hero who was to come, Jesus, right?
Yeah. I think just dismantling that whole idea is better for everybody. Not like that. God hasn't called people to leadership. I think that needs to be protected.
Yeah,
God does, and it's often not a blessing.
Oh,
right?
It's stinking hard.
It's a call to servanthood. It's a call to sacrifice. But if people of the church can view their leadership less as this social hierarchy of holiness, then they can also give more grace when leaders fail, or see a leader as a person that's kind of saying, I'm going to live my life in front of all of you purposefully because God has called me here.
Yeah.
And for the leaders, that gives you more incentive to be transparent, to be vulnerable, because that's what you're being called to do. You're being called to be just the sheep that everybody looks at.
Yeah.
To say, this is how I let God break my pride and break my wandering, and that's the only way I come back and actually follow Him.
Yeah.
That's what makes pastors hide so much, right? When they have sin, that makes them hide, and then the sin comes out, and now it's gotten so far that they're actually disqualified for leadership, and they're never going to have the respect of the people again because it was hidden for so long.
It would have been way better if, we could name off pastors that have fallen, right? But pick any one of them. If they would have 2 years ago kind of got up in front of everybody and said, I have a really hard time with my temper, or sometimes I drink too much. Like, it all would have gone so much better, right?
Yeah.
Like, they would have, it would have been hard, sure. And they would have had to have faced it and walked with people, but I'll bet you the people would have respected them and applied what they did to their own lives, versus it all having to explode one day.
It kind of takes the pressure off of people.
Yeah.
The people at your church as well, to have to hold up to that standard, that there's an illusion that it's being kept.
Yeah.
Right? It takes that away. It says, like, hey, this is what we do when we're struggling with things.
Yeah.
And that's the only way things get better.
And it actually leads to more following Jesus.
Yeah. I do think, one of the things that pastors struggle with, and I would say worship leaders and all that, is that there is a culture of celebrity, and to be in front of somebody, no matter who you are, you have to have some kind of ego. You have to like it. And so it's a temptation to be there and to have people respect you and want to know what you think and admire you. And so you can get caught up in that position too, of just, I'm important. And it begins to shape your thinking.
I don't have that personally, but
well, I will confess that I do, and there is and the more you work on your craft, and the more you see that you can shape your craft in a way that it impacts people, it becomes wow, no, I actually know something, and humility gets put on the back burner, and I think that that's the other thing. And I think our people like celebrity. So we have, and I'm not going to throw these people under the bus, but we have the Driscolls, the Pipers, that we have these people that we almost worship because of their charisma and their power. And I think we have to be careful to dismantle that in ourselves and to dismantle it publicly.
Yeah.
Yeah, not just I'm going to work on this privately about not being proud. No, we need to have this up front.
That was probably the biggest thing that actually was the downfall of Driscoll, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, he comes to mind as somebody who, if he a long time ago had put out there his issues, I think that church would still be chugging along.
Well, I think he even would do that with certain things, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I would listen to some of his stuff back in the day, but there was one area where it was just...
That one was...
Yeah.
And it was the one he didn't see. Other people saw it, but he didn't, right? And so that's the hard part, is it also involves listening and receiving it from somebody else, not just yourself.
Giving, like, I think when you ask, like, well, how friendship within community, how did it work? Well, when I first started the village, there was a guy named Doug Padgett who said, in order to have humility, you must give power to the weakest in your community. And I think that's something that the village has done well, and that is to allow people who are the weakest to have strong voices into the lives of the people who are leading. But they're not just there to be right, but that they actually bring truth into people's lives and question their walk just as much as we question theirs. And I think that allows, I mean, it's powerful to have somebody who's wrestling with their own demons to say, oh, look, I see your demons too, and I'm concerned about them.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And that's, it's a powerful experience.
Yeah, I want to throw one more thing in the middle of the table, really, for Eric and Mike.
Uh-oh.
Just real quick. So,
Thank you.
so yeah. So Brian, you and I
Go ahead, host
we can.
Pastor Andy.
Oh man. Sorry.
No, don't worry.
So
This is going to be a new
this
thing.
could be a follow-up podcast someday, but the tension between creativity and excellence. Where do you draw the line? Mike, Eric, do battle.
Well, I think that's unfair because Mike's context is different than my context.
And I'm also really creative too.
I just wanted to point out that you keep complaining about how things are unfair on this podcast.
I know.
Yeah, because life is very fair.
Life's always fair.
I think for me personally and for our community, it is, we are more a folk art community, and in folk art, we have a statement in our community that says, we are unhindered by quality control. That does not mean that we try to put, crap up because we're all lazy.
Right.
But the issue is we're driven to help people create a culture of art, which means that often our professional artists cringe. And it's really good for them.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of discipleship time with the ones who do it for a living to help them make those transitions.
Yeah.
I do believe that every context is different. But I do also think that our Christian culture lacks creativity in general.
Yeah.
And so I think churches like Mission, people like Mike, we're working on a critique of our culture, and maybe 100 years from now, what we're doing will be felt and understood, but not right now, I don't think. So that would be mine.
Yeah.
That wasn't nearly as agitating as I was hoping, Eric.
Well, I think we have the same frustration, and we're taking it on in different ways.
Yeah.
So, because I'm the creative director, and I'm in a position of authority, that gives me a little bit more of the ability to take it as a creative, as somebody who holds excellence highly. And obviously, as with anything else, the method is almost never the important part. It's why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing that people at Village are encouraged to explore their creativity and to learn how to express it. That's something that's really needed because the Christian media doesn't show you how to do that.
Yeah.
And that's also what I'm frustrated with. So the way we go about it is we say, well, we're going to do the best creative job that we all can. And we're going to show you that, yeah, it is important to God to take the talents you've been given and to be a good steward of it. Also, both of our approaches probably stem from both of our wounds as well, right?
Yeah.
So,
Sure. Oh, yeah.
so I regularly have to check myself and make sure, like, I'm not putting excellence above, like, the glory of God, for example.
Yeah.
Making sure I'm not calling to attention the talents of the people in the band, but the glory of God, making sure I'm pointing that all upwards or outwards, or however you want to call it.
Yeah.
There is no up in the universe.
Yeah. What is up from a global perspective?
Yeah. Yeah.
imagery.
Well, and I think that, like, a lot of, like, for us, you know, our church started in a place where people, like, I was in churches where I could not bring my friends simply because of the music. And it wasn't because of the excellence. Actually, the music was pretty amazing in the sense of excellence. Sure. But it did not, in its tone and in its sound and in its words, speak to them at all. It didn't speak to my community, which were, at that time, Gen Xers who were in their 20s and had never been to church. So the whole thing's confusing. What they were used to was a bar.
Right.
And you know, my mom forever has joked, like, oh, going to the Village is just like going to a bar. It is bar music. I mean, it's not like highly orchestrated. It's relatively loud, and it kind of has that sense of, like, you know.
And the players may or may not be sober.
Yes, at our church they are sober, so we're good with that end. And we do a lot of the musicians in the beginning, you know, had to learn their instruments. So it's like more monkey-esque, you know, and the things that I like as a musician, as my wife likes, you're talking, you know, late 70s, Ramon-style music, so it's a different world. And that works with the people that we were reaching. And so that was key for us, is to have music to try to express that. The other thing is, it was a very, lyrically, like, Bible ignorant kind of, they never even opened a Bible. So it's very scripture-directed music because we want people to hold on to truths that because they're not opening their Bible. They don't even know anything about the Bible. And so it's partly kind of beginning to work those things in. So it's mostly, it was out of a mission thing and knowing that, like, what was being played in the early or the mid-90s and late 90s in churches is not going to work.
You're right.
Even in the contemporary world. And so that was that's where we came out of in our space. So.
All right. I want to close on one more thing. I want to bring over Amy from XO Coffee. Amy, come here. So this is the first time that we've been doing this podcast where our friend Amy from XO is actually here.
Sit right here.
There we go.
So Amy, your business is beautiful.
Thank you
And
very
we love
much.
it.
Thank you.
And the food is so good, and we love what you do. So we just have, I guess, 2 questions for you. Mm-hmm. One would be, what's kind of your dream that made you want to have XO Coffee here in this city? What did you want to see happen in this place?
Well, I think for my husband and I, we were just wanting a place that brought community together and a place that made people feel really comfortable to come together, and for all the different organizations and groups and communities and sub-communities of people to be in a place where they can talk and converse. It sort of sounds basic, but it's actually, you have to create certain things to make that happen, and I think we're blessed that those things happened, you know. Synergy.
Yeah, you guys, I mean, you've been so good. We've had church gatherings here. We've rented the space. It's been such a great place for that. And there's just so many, I know, like, as far as my business goes and craftsmanship, like we're talking about wanting to meet here. People just want to be here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Done an awesome job.
Wouldn't happen if you guys didn't meet here.
It's true. Well, we love it. And then, so this is Faith Over Breakfast. And so a little tidbit that you and I have talked about before is that your grandfather was a pastor. Is that right?
So several relatives, so close great uncle on my father's side was Presbyterian pastor, and then my grandfather on my mom's side was a pastor. So my parents met at a Presbyterian college. So I grew up in the Presbyterian church. And strong Presbyterian roots. There, and he has a record of sermons on blue vinyl,
which I want to hear.
We have to bring that in. Maybe we could do a podcast episode where we actually do excerpts of it, because you could record some of it. Like excerpt it.
We would love that.
That would be amazing.
That'd be pretty.
His name was Malcolm Sweet.
Malcolm
Even
Sweet.
as a pastor name.
Yeah, it's really. He always wore a bowler hat.
Oh,
yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. It is special.
I love everything about this.
Yeah, my other piece of the question, I think you're kind of answering it, but so to some people, when they have like, my grandpa was a pastor, their reaction to that is like, I will never speak to a pastor again. My grandpa was a pastor,
Yeah,
right?
right, yeah.
Or for other people, it's like, my grandpa was a pastor, and that's kind of a sweet. There's something sweet. No, I mean, not his name, but like, there's something like I'm proud of him. Like, he did a good job.
Yeah.
What impression has that left upon you? Like, kind of having that in your family, like.
Well, I think for Doug, my husband, and I, both of us, for us having religious leaders in our family, because he also comes from, that was our first date. Like, within 10 minutes, we both had grandfathers who were pastors. So it was like, okay, let's talk about this. So I think for both of us, the shared thing that we have is that we don't have any hang-ups, I guess, about that. Because you're right.
Yeah.
A lot of people have that sort of, I don't know, a traumatic experience with that. And for us, even though we don't go to church, we're not like practicing, we still, it's like really important that we have that relationship to church in our lives. And that's something, we've talked about that before. But no, it's really something that means a lot to us, actually, as people. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Pastor Sweet, for
Pastor Sweet.
everything you did.
And, well, I got to tell you, the other pastor, father's side, was Buckley Rude.
Oh, that's good.
So my maiden name is Rude, but my mother's maiden name is Sweet.
Whoa.
I know.
Rude and sweet.
That is awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That's still a really great name.
Yeah.
Buckley Rude.
Buckley Rude, Malcolm Sweet.
Yeah. Those are incredible.
Both great pastor names.
Or gangsters, either one.
Yeah.
Or gangsters.
Yeah, totally.
That's awesome.
Well, thanks, Amy. I think that's all we got time for. Brian has to close us out because he's the host.
Thank you.
You wouldn't know because of Andy, but I'm the host. No, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for speaking with us. And to you as well. Of course. And to you as well, Mike. Thank you for joining us today. This is your host, Brian Betts. We were with Pastor Andy Littleton and Pastor Eric Seaton. This is Faith Over Breakfast at XO Coffee. You have an excellent day.
You gotta mix it, fix it. When you go to eat your cereal, you tricks it. Too many people trying to mix it, licks it. Well, I saw you down on the corner store. I seen you there many days before. I wondered, my, what a little fly boy like you doing hanging out with the goons in town. Oh, saw you by the liquor store. I asked you what you been down there for. You said I ain't got nothing to do with my time, so I'm committing petty crimes. And I walk down the streets through the city flocks and geeks. I see people walking around beating beats, beat diddy that, diddy do, and you say, what's your name? Where you come from anyway? I go to school to study education. My friend, it's such a thrill, it's such a high elation. You see, when I get to the top of the investigation, I'm about to let you down with the criminal interrogation. Take you into the court system. The problem is nobody ever wants to listen.